So trans legal I think it's a relatively new concept for Chicago House to have a legal component of the programming, but it just made so much sense, particularly for folks who are highly criminalized and have a lot of complicated legal issues related to that, or to their gender identity and expression, like document changes and making sure that things match up so that they can actually access employment.
We were talking a little bit about it before you came. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So I'm doing a bunch of things. Direct services, right, so legal representation. We have this drop-in clinic program that's happening during the TransSafe time.
We talked about that.
You're coming in at a good point. You
okay.
Do all that.
Lovely. And doing trainings. I work a lot with Angelica, doing trainings for employers, but also people going through the job readiness program on how to seal and expunge their criminal record, how to change their names, how to talk about their criminal record, what they have to disclose and what they don't, all those types of things. And then we have some bigger kind of legal policy issues that we're working on and working closely with Lambda Legal and the ACLU and big national organizations. Some of that is working on the Affordable Care Act and the interpretation of how it's going to apply to trans people. So what does non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity actually mean in healthcare? And I think we're actually going to be able to get the Illinois Department of Insurance to issue a bulletin clarifying at least how it's going to be interpreted here for the purposes of the exchange and Medicaid policies. We have an explicit ban in our Medicaid administrative code for treatment for gender identity disorder, being trans basically. So all trans-related healthcare is excluded from Medicaid here now, but I think that can change.
Did it used to be, recently became? Or
no, it has been.
It always has been.
Yeah.
But not if it's coded like endocrine disorder.
Right, exactly. Not if
Which is the way we
creative billing methods, yes. And we're working on a bunch of different issues. We have,
Cook County, talk about
the Cook County. Well, so Shannon, who's not here, she's one of our case managers for the Connect to Care program and the HRSA project, and she's been running this program at Cook County Jail with women who are in the men's division who are trans women for a year now, and
it's the largest jail system in the United States.
Right, and it has a fairly progressive jail policy that has changed recently after the Prison Rape Elimination Act regulations came out, and some litigation I think encouraged the Sheriff's Department to change its policy, but now there's but now there's a gender identity committee that evaluates every trans person who goes through the program. So there is more of a possibility of maintaining hormone treatments, other gender-specific health care, access to things like bras that usually in the men's facility would be contraband. And so we've been working with him and thinking about how we can kind of expand programming. Like there's an idea of a diversion program that's transgender specific for like prostitution offenses, as something that maybe we could run that would be very closely connected to our works program, and thinking about building self-esteem, but also like the root causes of why someone might engage in the sex trade.
And I'm sure it's just a huge incarceration rate among trans people, and somehow Tom Dart, who's our Cook County Sheriff, just kind of fell into helping us, and now then is willing to actually be a poster child and to teach other incarceration facilities how to actually do this well, because he's actually doing it well. And Lambda's really our huge partner in this, but it's very, very exciting.
Especially since there weren't diversion programs, like the women diversion programs didn't allow trans people, so there was not that option for them to.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that, there's two things happening there. One is that folks might be engaging in the sex trade for survival, right? And survival crime is a real thing, and the crimes of poverty are real things, and are connected with everything we were just talking about. But there's also a significant amount of profiling that happens, particularly of trans women of color, as being in the sex trade. That's like sort of the image, right, of like the street worker or something like that, to the point where our Chicago police policy about searching and detaining trans people specifically says that there should be no reasonable suspicion of engagement in prostitution just because someone is transgender. It actually says that in our policy because it's such a pervasive problem. So I think it makes, in some ways it makes sense to have a trans-specific diversion program for that because there are so many specific issues in the community about the sex trade and sex industry.
So let me guess, there's no other community in the country that has a trans diversion program?
I'm not aware of one.
Yeah.
All right. It's been kind of a common theme in the conversation.
And part of it too is that our community's been, in kind of entrenched in like sex positivity, and a lot of different things. And there's some people who approach the sex work as an empowering thing. So for some people, it's an imprisoning thing. So you know, it's really having the courage to deliver this sort of curriculum around value system and self-determination, so that they decide, you know, at what stage of each value is this worth it to me.
And even to deal realistically, I mean, Angelica and I were just talking, you know, like somebody leaving a lucrative sex trade position, sex work position, to start working minimum wage. It's just not realistic. And so how do we work in ways with our employment program that are realistic of how you build a new career while you don't necessarily cut this off and have it be so black and white, which again, of course, involves Owen and Owen. Actually, there's the largest trans legal program in the nation is out of San Francisco, and we got a grant through HUD for them to be kind of mentoring us as we get started with trans legal here. There's an amazing guy there named Mason Davis who runs that.
So what was your path to doing that work here?
Well, where do I start? So I actually became, I guess I became really focused on criminal legal issues in trans community when I was in law school. That was kind of my entry point, was working with people who were living in poverty and seeing how everything was complicated by involvement in the criminal system, right? Like it was the legal reason to discriminate in employment, it was the legal reason to deny housing, it was, you know, connected to, I was doing even simple name change cases are more complicated when there's involvement in the criminal system. In New York, you have to notify your probation officer, and here there's actually a 10-year bar for felonies, or some are permanent depending what the crime is. So I came back to Chicago, where I'm originally from. My dad was in Milwaukee, my mom was here. And I felt like I really wanted to bring some of what I learned in New York. I went to law school in New York back to the Midwest. Like, I really feel like the Midwest needs to be pushing these issues. I don't like that it's, particularly in the LGBT community, it feels very coastal sometimes. Like, those are the places where people are
I'm
really
from
pushing.
Minneapolis, so I know what you're saying.
Hello, Midwest. Midwest is best. So, she's from Milwaukee, too. Sorry. Spookier Milwaukee. But so I came back here and I actually co-founded a legal organization that Monica is also part of, called the Transformative Justice Law Project, which is really focused on criminal legal issues. And it's completely unfunded, and like there's a lot of struggles that we have there with running that program, but we also have a lot of success with using, you know, harnessing volunteer capacity and thinking about ways that we can train non-lawyers to do legal advocacy, or, you know, just creative ways to use the resources we have to support the community actually doing the work itself.